Hello everyone, I'm Anita with AnitaByDesign.com and welcome back to the Beginner's Sewing course. Today we're starting lesson number 2. Now last week during lesson number 1, I taught you guys how to read your pattern envelope, how to choose your fabric and notions, and how to pre-treat your fabric. So you should have purchased your pattern, Butterick 4686, an invisible zipper, a coordinating thread, and of course your fabric. Now, if you have not taken the time to pre-treat your fabric, I highly recommend you take care of that before starting your project, or else you'll run the risk of shrinkage during washing after your garment is all sewn together, and you just don't want to go there. Now, one other thing that you're going to need before starting your project is patience. Just take your time. I'm going to be working at a very slow pace, so there's no need to rush. Now, some of you will jump in and you will just take off with this. But some of you will struggle a little bit with understanding, and that's okay. Just remember, the videos will be here for you always, and you can watch them, you can rewind, you can pause or watch over and over and over, whatever you need to do. So just be patient with yourself, be patient with the process, and then you'll learn how to sew. Now, I like to approach my sewing projects strategically, and my strategy includes 3 steps. They are preparation, construction, and cleanup. During the preparation stage, I pre-treat my fabric. I gather all of the supplies that I need for the garment. I will cut out my pattern, thread my sewing machine, and anything else that I need to do before starting the sewing. Then the construction stage includes sewing the garment together from beginning to end. Then during cleanup, I will remove all of the basting stitches, which are temporary stitches that we use during construction, and you'll learn all about that. I will cut away any loose threads and then give the garment a final press, or I'll send it to the dry cleaners for a professional press if I need to. So those are the 3 steps that we're going to use for this project. So let's get started. Starting on the top left of the pattern, you'll see here that this pattern is printed in English and French. It comes with, the pattern instruction sheet comes with 3 pages, and the 3rd page is in French, so we won't be using that 3rd page. Moving down to the next section, you get illustrations of what the different views will look like. In the next section, you get pictures of what the actual pattern pieces will look like after they're cut out. And down below, you get information on which pattern pieces you will need for the view that you're making. So we're working on views C and D. So I've highlighted here, I'm making skirt C, and I've highlighted all of the pattern pieces that I will need to make skirt C. So I would like for you to go ahead and highlight this area too, so that you can know which pattern pieces you need. So it tells us to make skirts C or D, you need pattern pieces number 3, 4, 5, and 6. Piece number 3 is here, and that's a skirt back. Piece number 4 is here. That's a skirt front. Piece number 5 is a yoke front, and piece number 6 is a yoke back. I have also included a PDF pocket piece, which is not included in this pattern, so you can easily go and download that and print that piece off, and we'll be using that when it comes time to cut. Moving down below, you get the scale of the body measurements, and you get the same information on the back of the pattern envelope, so they just give it to you here again. Moving down, you will get information for the fabric cutting layouts, and this is where we get into the meat of it. Now, this symbol that you see here, this indicates bust line, waistline, hip line, or biceps measurements, and these are the measurements that you will have, or that the garment will be after it's finished. So this indicates a finished measurement of the garment, and the finished measurement includes your body measurement, the wearing ease, and the design ease. The wearing ease is the extra inches that you get in order for you to be able to wear the garment, and then the design ease is the extra inches that you get based on the design of the garment that you're making. So if you're making a very fitted dress, then you'll get less ease. If you're making a an oversized dress or something that's free-flowing, then you'll get more extra inches to make that piece. Now, moving down below, the cutting lines on the pattern pieces include the seam allowance that you will need to sew the garment together. So the body measurements that you take to pick the cutting line that you're going to be cutting for your pattern piece already includes the seam allowance, so you don't have to add any extra inches to sew the garment together. Moving down below, the layout that you choose for the skirt that you will be making will be based on the width of your fabric and the size that you're sewing. Now, let's take a look at this diagram here. And here we learn how to lay out the pattern pieces and how to lay out the fabric on our cutting table. Let's look at the fabric first. Here you will see a shaded gray diagram. This indicates the right side of the fabric. So when you see this in your layout, that means you're going to lay your fabric out with the right side of the fabric showing. When you see a white diagram, that means you're going to be looking at the wrong side of the fabric. Now moving over to the pattern section, whenever you see a white picture of a pattern piece, that means you're looking at the right side of the pattern. Whenever you see a dotted picture, that means you're looking at the wrong side of the pattern piece. So go ahead and look over at the diagram for skirt D, and I'm just going to put this here for you to see. Now, let's first look at this rectangle here. You will see that the background of that rectangle is gray, it's shaded. So going back over to the diagram, you see the gray shaded picture? That means you're looking at the right side of the fabric. So this fabric is laid out flat with the right side of the fabric facing up. Then you'll see these pattern pieces, the white pictures. Going back over to the diagram, when you're looking at a white pattern piece, that means you're looking at the right side of the pattern. So this pattern piece is laid on top of your fabric with the right side of the pattern facing up. And then these dotted pictures indicate that you're looking at the wrong side of the pattern piece. So these pattern pieces are laid on top of your fabric with the wrong side facing up. And that's all you need to know about understanding the diagram and how to lay out your fabric and pattern pieces. Let's move on to the next section. In this section, we're going to take a look at the abbreviations and some of the diagrams that you will see on your pattern pieces and the pattern instruction sheet for the layout. In this section, you get your abbreviations. Here you have ST, ASTT, SL, FP, and CFPT. The first letter is for English and the second letter is for French. Now the ST is for size, and this indicates the layout that you will be choosing based on the size of the pattern that you will be cutting. The ASTT is for all sizes, and this indicates a layout that you can use for all sizes within that pattern envelope. The SL stands for selvage, and the selvage is the manufactured finished edges of your fabric. The FP is for fold, and this indicates a layout where you will be folding your fabric lengthwise for cutting out your pattern pieces. And the CFPT is for crosswise fold, and this indicates a layout that you will be laying out your pattern pieces or folding your fabric crosswise to lay out your pattern pieces. Now going back up here, you see a single asterisk and a double asterisk. The single asterisk is for a layout where you will be using a fabric with a nap, and that would be fabric with one-way direction prints, plaids, stripes, or fabrics like corduroy or velvet or any type of fabric where if you run your hand across the fabric in a certain direction, you're going to get a different shading. Now the double asterisk is without nap, so this will indicate a layout that you can use for fabrics without nap. Moving down to single thickness and double thickness. When you lay out your fabric in a single thickness, that means flat without any fold, you're going to place the fabric right side up. When you lay out your fabric in a double thickness, you're going to be folding your fabric, and you're going to fold it either lengthwise or crosswise. And the layout, the diagram will indicate, which direction you will be folding that fabric. Now, you will also have a grain line diagram printed onto your pattern sheet, and it will be an arrow like this. Whenever you see this arrow on your pattern piece, this tells you how to lay that pattern piece onto your fabric. And this arrow needs to be parallel with the selvage of your fabric. And again, the selvage is the finished edge of your fabric lengthwise. Next, you will have a diagram like this, and this indicates that, or you will find this on your pattern piece, and this indicates that that pattern piece needs to be placed on the fold of your fabric, wherever you see these arrows. Now, moving down, whenever you see a picture like this one, this indicates that you need to cut all of your larger pieces first and allow enough fabric to cut this piece out. And then here for B, the same thing, allow enough fabric to cut your other pieces, and then you're going to fold your fabric with the right sides together. That's why you see the white picture here and the shaded area there. And then you're going to place that pattern piece onto the fold of the fabric. Now, when you see this star on your pattern piece, it means that you're going to cut that pattern piece once. You will only need one piece of that pattern piece, or one of those pattern pieces for your garment. Now, all of this may seem like a lot of information, perhaps confusing, but don't worry, because as we start doing these things, you will understand it a lot better. So let's move into the layout for cutting out your pattern. Now we're looking at the diagram for skirt C, and this is the diagram for the layout based on the fabric width that you have chosen and the sizes that you will be cutting. So I'm going to be sewing skirt C, and so I'll use this to teach you guys. Now, here, go ahead and highlight whichever view you are using. If you're doing view D, go ahead and highlight that. And then to the right, it tells you which pieces you're going to need. So pieces 3 through 6, plus your pocket piece that I have given you. Now, if you have chosen a 45-inch width fabric and you are cutting sizes 6 through 12, then this first diagram is the one that you will be using to lay out your fabric and pattern pieces. If you have chosen a 45-inch width fabric and you are cutting sizes 14 through 20, then this second diagram is what you will be using to lay out your fabric and pattern pieces. If you have chosen a 60-inch width fabric, this is the diagram you will be using for all sizes included in the envelope. Now, I am using a 60-inch fabric, and I'm cutting a size 10. So this is the diagram I will be using. Now, looking at this square and looking at SL here and SL there tells me that I'm going to lie my fabric out with the right side facing up. That's the shaded picture. And then I'm going to have a selvage here and a selvage there. So knowing that there are two selvages tells me that this fabric is opened out flat. Now, looking at the pictures here, you get piece number 4 here and piece number 4 there. So this white one is the right side of piece number 4. I'm going to lay it out here, and then I'm going to flip it over to the wrong side, butt it up against this line, and cut it out here. So you get one piece. We're not going to cut down the center. We're going to place piece number 4 here on the right side, then flip it over to the wrong side and cut around the perimeter. And we're going to do the same thing for piece number 3. We're going to lay out piece number 3 on the right side, flip it over to the wrong side, and then lay out piece number 3, cut out the perimeter or trace it, and you'll see this when we get to the cutting. Flip it over to the wrong side and cut again. Then you'll see piece number 5. You're going to lay it out here, and then you're going to lay it out here. And then for piece number 6, it needs to be placed on a fold. So, you're going to fold the fabric. It doesn't have to be placed on the fold according to this, because both pieces would be on the fold. But you're going to fold the fabric in half and then place your pieces and cut. Again, you're going to understand this so much better once we do it. So I'm going to show you if this all sounds foreign to you. But just so you know how to read the diagram, you have the information here. All right, now I want to teach you how to read the information on your pattern pieces. So go ahead and grab your tissue paper from your envelope and locate pieces 3 through 6. Now, if you purchased envelope AA, then all of those pieces will be on one sheet. If you purchased the other envelope with the larger sizes, then your pieces may be spread out over 2 sheets to allow room for the extra space needed for the larger sizes. So grab your envelope and then we'll come back here and we'll read the details on the pattern pieces. Okay, starting with pattern piece number 5. First, you'll notice the number 5. This just tells you which pattern piece this is. Right below the 5 is a description of this pattern piece. So this is yoke front, and it's for views C, D, and E. Down below that, you will get for views C and D, it will tell you to cut 2 on the fold out of your fabric. Below that, you get the pattern company, the pattern number, and below that, you get the sizes that are included in this pattern. Over to your left, you will see the cutting lines. Now, these are the lines that you will cut on based on the size that you have chosen to cut. But before I get more into this, I want to bring your attention over to the right. And here you see this symbol that we talked about in the pattern instruction sheet. This is the symbol, and it says waistline here. So this tells you that these measurements you see here under the symbol will be the measurements for the different sizes after this garment is finished. So if you've chosen to cut a size 10, when this garment is finished, the circumference of the waist will be 26.5 inches. Now, if that's too small for your waist measurement, then you will need to go up a pattern or go up a size or 2, and that will be determined by the finished waist measurement. Now, over here down below, you will see this little symbol here with the double arrows, and this indicates that this pattern piece will be cut on the fold of the fabric. Now, going back over to the cutting lines, if based on the finished waist measurement, you will be cutting a size 10, then this line here, the dashes, will be the line that you're cutting on. So this solid line is for cutting a 12. The broken line is for cutting a size 10. The next line with the medium and short dashes, medium, short, is for cutting a size 8. And then for cutting a size 6, you get a line of short dashes. So to keep track of which size you're cutting, go ahead and use a highlighter if you'd like to help you to remember where you're cutting, and just highlight the size that you're cutting. And this will really come in handy when you start cutting pattern pieces where the lines are intersecting each other. So that's pattern piece number 5. Now let's move down to pattern piece number 4. And here you get the same information. Over to your left, you get another symbol, but this one is for the hip. And these measurements here are for the finished hip measurement. So make sure you check that. And if the size that you have chosen is too small, then go up a size or 2. If it's too big, then you'll need to go down. Moving down on this pattern piece, you'll get a section that talks or teaches you about preparing your pattern. And we've kind of gone through that already, so you can read through that again if you'd like. And then over here to your left, you just get your pattern glossary. So that's the information that you will find on your pattern pieces. Oh, one more I need to bring your attention to is over here to the left. You see these little triangles? These are called notches. And notches are markings that you'll be transferring onto your fabric to help you to know which pieces to match up together for sewing. Okay, let's go ahead and start laying or preparing the tissue paper for cutting. And what you're going to do is take your paper scissors. Make sure you're using your paper scissors, not your fabric scissors. And you're going to locate the line that you're cutting on. We're going to start with piece number 5. Now there are two ways you can do this. You can go ahead and cut on the line right now and then take it to the ironing board and iron it out later. Or you can cut around the lines, not on the line. Take it to the ironing board, iron it, get all the wrinkles out and folds, and then go ahead and cut on the line. I'm going to cut on the line now and then iron later. So what we can do to make sure we have a flat, straight piece is just take your hand and kind of flatten out that piece to get rid of any wrinkles and some of the folds. And then you will go ahead and cut on the line for your size. And when you're cutting, practice cutting with your blade, the bottom blade, resting on your table. And take nice long strides. So you're just going to cut the piece out all the way around, keeping the blade on the table. Now, once we have this piece cut out, and we cut out all the rest of our pieces, you're going to take this to your ironing board and you're going to place your iron on a dry setting. Make sure you don't have your steam setting on when you're pressing your pattern pieces, because the steam will shrink your pattern. So set your iron for a dry setting and then iron the pattern pieces. So let's go do that right now. I now have all of my pattern pieces cut out. So now I'm going to demonstrate to you how I iron the pieces. So I'll take these smaller pieces and put them aside, skirt back. And I'm going to iron this skirt front piece. And what I usually do is iron from the back side, but it doesn't matter. You can iron from the front side, it doesn't matter. Make sure, again, that your iron setting is on dry. And then you're going to put it on a low setting also. You don't want to have the iron too high so that you don't destroy the pattern piece. Remember, this is tissue paper. So on a low setting, a dry iron, go ahead and just iron over the pieces. It's just like ironing a piece of clothing. And you don't have to go over it too many times. You're just kind of getting out those wrinkles and folds enough for the piece to lie flat onto your fabric. So iron it flat, and that's it. And you're going to do that on all of your pieces. And when I meet you back here, we're going to have our fabric laid out and we're going to lay our pattern pieces onto the fabric. So go ahead and iron all of your pieces and I'll meet you back here. Now let's talk about what you're going to need, the supplies that you're going to need to cut out your fabric and transfer the markings from your pattern piece onto the fabric. First, you're going to need all of your pattern pieces. You're going to need a tape measure, your yardstick, your fabric scissors, the tracing wheel and the tracing paper in a contrasting color. You're going to need your straight pins. Now, I will be sewing with a knit fabric, so I'm using ballpoint straight pins, which are the correct ones to use with knit fabric. So if you're sewing with a knit fabric, you're going to need ballpoint pins. If you're sewing with a woven fabric, then regular straight pins will do just fine. You can also use these metal washers, and you can use them as pattern weights to hold down your pattern pieces onto your fabric. You're also going to need either your tailor's chalk, a disappearing ink pen, or a water-soluble pencil. If you're using a light colored fabric, you're going to use the darker colored pencil. Vice versa, if you're using a darker fabric, you can use the lighter colored pencil. Now for these tools, you can choose whichever one you want to use. All right? And then finally, you're going to need a damp cloth if you're using a water-soluble marking pen or pencil, because after you make your markings onto the right side of the fabric, you're going to have to use the damp cloth to remove those markings. All right, so let's get started and lay out our pattern pieces. For all of the views in this pattern, the fabric layout calls for the fabric to be laid out on the table flat with the right side facing up. Now, when we do that, you will see that we have the selvage, which we learned is the manufactured finished edges of the fabric. So we have two selvages. There's this end and then the other end over here. Now you'll notice I have my fabric folded on to itself, and the reason I did that is because my table is not large enough to hold the entire piece flat. And you don't want to let your fabric hang off of the table because it can distort things when cutting. So if your table is not big enough, just fold it over until you're ready to use that edge of the fabric. Now, coming back over to this edge, we're going to lay out our first piece, which is the skirt front. And according to my layout, I'm going to lay out this first piece with the right side facing up. And in order to do that properly, I need to make sure that this straight edge is lined up even with the cross grain of the fabric. And the way I'm going to find that is I'm going to take my yardstick, and the edge of my yardstick I'm going to line up with the edge of my selvage on the fabric. Now the best way to do this would be to use an L square ruler that's shaped like an L, but since I didn't tell you guys to purchase one of those, I'm just going to demonstrate with the yardstick. So go ahead and line that up, and then you're going to take the edge of your pattern piece and line it up right against your yardstick to make sure that it's straight. Now remember, I told you whenever you see a symbol on your pattern piece with the double arrows and it says center fold, that's where you will be placing this pattern piece on the fold of the fabric. But for our layout, we're not folding the fabric, we're leaving the fabric flat. So what's going to happen to create this center for the front is after we trace this pattern piece, we're going to flip it over and trace it again or cut it out so that we have one full piece. So let's do that. So now that it's lined up, you are going to use either your straight pins or your washers to attach the piece or anchor the piece down to the fabric. Now if you are using straight pins, you're going to take your pin and pin it right into the pattern piece through the fabric, just like that. And I like to pin my corners before I go in between. So just go ahead and pin the corner pieces. I like to pin my or insert my pins parallel to the line. That's just the way I do it. Some people like to pin perpendicular. I think it's a matter of preference, so you can just choose how you want to insert your pins. Now I have the corners pinned, then I'm going to go in between and add a pin on these long edges and then the bottom edge. Now as you start sewing more and become more comfortable, you will be able to use less pins. Now if you are not using pins and you prefer to use your pattern weights, then you will just take your washers and just place them in the corners or wherever is comfortable for you to keep that pattern piece down. Now for this piece, instead of cutting, normally you would go ahead and just cut out the pattern piece, but because we have to flip this piece over, I'm going to trace the outer edges and I'm going to leave this piece. But in order for me to flip it over and have it in the proper place, I need to draw a line here to let me know where to line up this pattern piece once I flip it over. So go ahead and place your ruler. Oops, let's remove those pins so that we can lie the ruler flat. So go ahead and use your yardstick and line it up with the edge of that pattern piece. Then you're going to take whichever marking tool you choose and you're just going to draw a straight line from the top to the bottom. Okay, remove your yardstick and that line is there. Then you can go ahead and replace your pins if you're using pins. And since I have the pattern weights there, I'm just going to leave that as is. Now I could either go ahead and cut out these three edges, flip it over, and then cut out the rest, or if you choose, you can trace the outer edges. I'm going to go ahead and trace it, so you can just freehand this. Just trace that all the way. And if your lines aren't very straight, if they aren't perfect, don't worry about it, because when you're cutting, you will be able to perfect that line and make it straighter. So just go ahead and trace as best you can, as close to that line as you can get. And once you come to the end, you're going to remove your pins. Oh no, actually before you move on, I want you to notice the notches here. Because we haven't cut that piece out yet, we need to mark these notches so that when we do go and cut this pattern piece as one, then you'll know that there were notches there. So you can take a pencil or a marking pen, and right where those notches are, go ahead and put a little line. And because you have double notches, put 2 lines. Okay, then you have another notch up top here, so you're going to go and put a single line to let you know that there's a notch there. And then those are the only markings that we have to make on this pattern piece. So let's go ahead and remove the washers and the pins. We're going to flip this pattern piece over and do the same thing on the other side. And this time I'm going to use the pattern weights only to save time. So let's take it and flip it over to the wrong side, and you're going to line up the pattern piece with that line and place your pattern weights or use your pins to anchor it down. You don't want them too close to the edges. And then this time, I'm not going to trace. I'm going to just start cutting. So take your paper scissors. I'm sorry, your fabric scissors. These are not paper scissors. Take your fabric scissors and start your cutting. And you can start cutting wherever you feel most comfortable. Some people like to cut with the blade to the right side of the pattern piece. Some people like to cut with the blade to the left side of the pattern piece. Do whatever is most comfortable for you. I do both. So I'm going to start on this side, and I'm going to just cut with long strides, keeping the blade of my scissor in contact with the table. Cut all the way down to the end. Okay, then I'm going to do the same thing going around this way. I'm going to come over here and work my way up, and I'm going to cut right along the edge of that pattern. Try not to cut into the pattern, just right along the edge with long strides, keeping the blade of the scissor in contact with the table. Now I'm going to cut the top edge. Now when you're cutting at home, you'll be able to walk around your cutting table to get into a more comfortable position for cutting, but for filming purposes I have to stay on this side, so I'm not able to go around. And then your last edge, cut that out all the way to the end. And there you have it. Now, remember, we have to cut out the notches on this side too. But this time, we're going to use the tip of the scissor, the tip of the blade, and we're going to cut just to the tip of the triangle, or stopping just before the tip, so that you don't cut too far into the seam allowance. So you're going to do 1 snip, 2 snips for the double notch. Then up here you have your single notch, so you're just going to go in and do 1 single snip. Like that. Okay, and so this is our front pattern piece, the skirt front. Remove your washers, remove your pattern piece, and there you have your skirt front. But remember, this is the front of your fabric. This is the right side. You have to remove this line. So that's what your damp washcloth is for. If you have used a water-soluble pencil or tailor's chalk or a water soluble marker, then you're going to take your damp cloth and just wipe it away, and it will disappear. If you have to wet your cloth again, then go ahead and do that. So just remove that marking, that line from your fabric. Now, if you're using a fabric that is not machine washable, then of course you won't be able to do this. You won't be able to use water, a damp cloth on it. What you will do is use a water soluble pen, or I'm sorry, a disappearing ink pen, and that disappears on its own over time. Okay, so once that's done, you've removed your mark completely. You can go ahead, just make sure you go over it again if you have to remove the residue of that line. What you will do next is go ahead and take this to the ironing board and just iron this out flat, because as you get it wet with some fabrics, you will create a little crinkly effect there. So go ahead and take it to the ironing board and iron it flat. Then you can go and start cutting your other pieces. Okay, this is the layout for the 60-inch width fabric that I'm using. I just cut out pattern piece number 4 with the right side facing up, then I flipped it over so that the wrong side would be facing up, and then I cut one piece. Now for pattern piece number 3, I'm going to cut that just opposite of pattern piece number 4. Now when you look at this diagram, it looks like I'm going to be doing the same thing with the right side facing up, flipping it over, and cutting with the wrong side as one piece. However, this is the center back of pattern piece number 3. Pattern piece uses a zipper, so it's not going to be just one piece. It's going to be cut in 2 separate pieces. So if you're using this layout, you're going to cut pattern piece number 3 with the right side up, then cut it again separately with the wrong side up, cutting on all 4 edges of the fabric. Now, if you're using one of the other layouts for any of the other sizes, you're going to be cutting pattern piece number 3 on opposite ends of your fabric. So you'll cut one piece with the wrong side of the pattern facing up, and the other piece on the opposite end of the fabric with the right side facing up. Now, to lay out pattern piece number 3, we are going to have to focus on the grain line. Now, this arrow on pattern piece number 3 indicates that this pattern piece needs to be lined up with the grain line of the fabric. Now, grain in fabric refers to the lines or the process that is used when weaving the fabric together and constructing the fabric. So you have 3 different grains. You have the lengthwise grain that goes along the selvage. Then you have the crosswise grain, which goes perpendicular to the selvage. And you also have what's called the bias, and that is the diagonal grain of the fabric. Now, we're not going to talk about diagonal. That gets a little technical. We won't talk about that until we have to use that. But just know that the crosswise grain gives you the most stretch in your fabric. Okay? So we're lining this up with the lengthwise grain. Unless the pattern piece tells you to line it up or to place the edge of the pattern piece on the crosswise grain, you're going to always line it up with the selvage where you will find your lengthwise grain. So to line this pattern piece up with the grain, you're going to take your tape measure and just kind of eyeball it and try to make it straight. Then use your tape measure. Measure from the edge of the selvage to that line. And I have 9 1/4 inches. So I'm going to take a pattern weight and place it there, or you can place whatever you have to hold that down. Then go to the opposite end of that arrow and measure again, and you want to hit 9 1/4. So I am just a little past the 9 1/4 inch line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this in place and shift down. I think I'm going the right direction. And we're going to measure again. Just went a little bit too far, so I'm going to shift it just a little bit more. Tiny bit more. And now I have my measurement. So I have 9 1/4 inch here and 9 1/4 inch here. But remember that rule, or maybe you haven't heard it. Measure twice, cut once. So we're going to measure again and make sure we have it right. So we have 9 1/4 here, and we have 9 1/4 here. So we're good. Now we can either pin your pattern pieces or lay out your pattern weights, and you're going to cut around all 4 edges of this pattern piece. Once you're done cutting, you're going to flip it over to the wrong side. You know, move it down where you need to move it. Do the same thing. You're going to line up the grain line with the selvage of your fabric, pin it down, and go ahead and cut the 4 edges. Then you'll have your 2 back pieces. After you have piece number 3 all cut out, you're going to need to transfer your markings onto your fabric. So you have your notches. On the back edge, you have triple notches. So snip into these 3 notches without going through that point. Then on the other side, you have 2 notches. And at the top, you have 2 notches. You also have this little circle here, and this is going to be transferred using either your water-soluble pencil or your tracing paper and tracing wheel. Now, remember, this is the right side of the fabric. So what you can do with your tracing paper and tracing wheel is you can take your tracing paper, open it out, slip it under your fabric so that the tracing paper is on the wrong side of the fabric. Then you're going to take your tracing wheel and just make an X through or right on top of that circle. Okay? And that will transfer your marking onto the back of the fabric. And I'll show you that. Let me move the pattern piece. I don't know if you can see that, but there's an X on the back of the pattern piece, or on the back of the fabric. Okay? Another thing you can do, if you don't want to use the tracing paper to transfer that little dot, and by the way, this dot is to indicate where your zipper will stop, the bottom of your zipper. So another thing you can do is you can use your water-soluble pencil or water-soluble marker and a straight pin. So you will take your straight pin, place it at the center of that circle, insert it through the fabric, take your pencil, fold up the pattern piece, and where you see that pin, you will go ahead and make your marking. And you will have to just keep pressing until you can see the dot. Remove it, and if you want to make it bigger, just go ahead and make an X. And there you have your marking. We now have 3 pieces left to cut out. We have the yoke front, the yoke back, and the pocket piece. So first, let's go ahead and cut out the yoke front and yoke back, looking at the diagram again. Looking at the diagram, you will see that piece number 5 is laid out onto the flat fabric along with pieces 3 and 4. And you're going to be cutting 2 on the fold. But because they're laid out on a flat piece, you're going to use the same technique that you used for piece number 4, where you lay out pattern piece number 5 on the right side, trace it, flip it over, and then cut out that pattern piece number 5 as one piece. And you'll have to do that twice. For pattern piece number 6, and remember, this is for the layout for 60-inch width fabric. For pattern piece number 6, they're asking, or we're going to need 4 pieces. So you're going to take your fabric. You'll see that you have a shaded area for the fabric and a white area for the fabric. This shows that your fabric is folded onto itself with the right sides facing. And so this pattern piece number 6 is going to be placed on a double thickness of fabric with the right side of the pattern facing up. And you're going to cut 4 pieces, 2 here and 2 here. And those are going to be cut as, as one piece, but you're going to get 2 pieces because it's a double thickness of fabric. Now moving up to the 45-inch width diagram, if you're using a 14 through 20, you'll notice you're going to cut pattern pieces number 6, 2 of them on the open piece of fabric. Then you're going to cut the other 2 over here on the open piece of fabric, but pieces number 5 are cut on the fold. So what they have done here is they've taken the fabric and they've folded it over just enough to fit pattern piece number 5 on the fold 2 times. So again, take the fabric, fold it over onto itself with the right sides facing, and place pattern piece number 5 on the fold right next to each other so that you get 2 of those pieces. And here in the shaded area, you will see you place your pattern piece number 6 to get 2 more so that you have a total of 4 number 6 pieces. Moving up to the 45-inch width layout for sizes 6 through 12, all of your pieces, the smaller pieces, are going to be cut on the double thickness. So you're folding your fabric onto itself, right side spacing. You're placing pattern piece number 6 on the edge here, and you're getting 4 pieces. You're placing pattern piece number 5 on the fold, and you're getting 2 pieces. So you can go ahead and follow the diagram that you are, or the layout that you are cutting, and go ahead and cut those pieces. Now, I will show you how to fold the fabric over. So let's go and take a look at how that's done. The fabric is still laid out on my table with the right side of the fabric facing up. To fold the fabric, you will just take the edge and fold it over on itself. And now you have the right sides facing each other. And to place your fabric on the fold, you're going to take your pattern piece, and this is pattern piece number 5, and on the edge here it has the diagram with the double arrows indicating that this is the edge that needs to be placed on the fold. So you're going to take that edge, follow the diagram, and see if it tells you to place it wrong side up or right side up, and follow that, and just place that edge right on the fold of the fabric. Then you're going to either pin or place your pattern weights, and then you will cut around the 3 edges of this pattern piece. Then you will take this piece, move it over, line it up with the edges, and you're going to cut around the 3 edges again, and that will give you 2 pieces for number 5. Now, for piece number 6, you're going to need 4. And again, you're going to be working with a double thickness of fabric on some of the layouts. I think on a couple of them, as I showed you before, you will be working on a single thickness. So if you're working on the double thickness, go ahead and lay this pattern piece. Now, pattern piece number 6 has a grain line arrow. So you know that means that you will have to line up this pattern piece with this arrow parallel to the selvage of your fabric. So go ahead and lay it out onto your fabric, and you're going to measure using your tape measure on both ends of the grain line arrow. Make sure that it's even with your selvage, and then you're going to pin, place your pattern weights, whichever you choose, and cut around all 4 edges of this fabric. Then move it over, cut around all 4 edges. Or if you're cutting on single thickness, you're going to cut on one with the right side up, one with the wrong side up, and just get your 4 pieces. Okay, and then the final piece that you will be cutting is your pocket. Now, the diagrams that are included in the pattern layout don't have a picture for this pattern piece, of course, because I gave you this pattern piece, and you should have a copy of this. I included this in the blog post on May 6th when the class started. So if you want to go and print this PDF pattern piece, you can go there and then just go ahead and cut it out. And this piece has the grain line arrow. So you're going to take this, you need 4 cuts, 4 pocket pieces, and you're going to use whatever fabric you have left over and line it up with the grain of the fabric, the lengthwise grain, measure with your tape measure, and then go ahead and cut 4 pieces for this pocket. Okay, we have now completed our first cutting process. So the pieces that you should have are 1 front piece, 2 back pieces, skirt front, skirt back, 2 front yoke pieces, 4 back yoke pieces, and 4 pocket pieces. Now that we have all of our pieces cut out, we are ready to move on to the next step, and that is construction. So I will meet you guys here next week and we'll be ready to sew. Until then, remember, when you live in your design, it is from there that you shine. See you guys next week. Bye-bye.